I'm revealing an e-commerce brand today which we blew up by over 20,000% in a 30-day period just with Google Ads alone to roughly $60,000 per month in revenue. Now, this is one of the biggest feats I've had to date because of the insane level of scale we were able to achieve so shortly, and that too for a high-ticket e-commerce brand like this, because the reality is most e-commerce brands don't even know how to maintain profitability long-term, let alone scale to a level where it's at a 14x ROAS. So today I want to show you everything from start to finish, the strategy behind how we approach this high-ticket brand to basically how we got it to this level. Now, before we actually deep dive into how we even got it to this level, let's take a step back and understand this brand on a deeper level. Now, we began working with this brand on the 4th of June, which was basically last month, and ever since then, the entire trajectory of this brand has completely changed. Now, if we take a close look at the time period before we began work, we can see just how this brand was performing overall. There were a lot of hurdles which this brand had to overcome, and during this time, results were non-existent because the reality is, because this is such a high-ticket store selling these types of products right here, which is basically a cold plunge or an ice bath, and because of the nature of the product, the average order value can sometimes be thousands and thousands of dollars. During this time, it was roughly $5,400. But as you see right here, during this time, there were very few days when the brand was actually even making money with Google. A lot of the sales in the back end from Shopify were coming from organic traffic. And as we all know, just relying on organic traffic in 2024, that's not really an ideal situation. I mean, the biggest sale during this time was on this day, basically on May the 2nd, when they got a $10,000 sale. Otherwise, this brand was not achieving much scale. It was not achieving much growth. These numbers, actually, the conversion tracking was off. It was a little bit even lower than this. So in reality, the brand was in a complete loss and they did not know how to approach Google Ads. So that's when we kind of came in. This was, by the way, under my Google Ads agency or marketing. But when I came in, what I found out was a lot of these campaigns, if you look right here, what they were doing was there was really no type of strategy in place. I mean, this first search campaign, it's a branded search campaign. That's the only campaign that was generating results. All these other campaigns you see right here, which spent some amount of money during the time before we began work, these were cold traffic campaigns. And the major reason I found out personally after doing a little audit of this brand was there was no real strategy or no real approach in place. I mean, they had standard shopping campaigns running where the bids, basically it was a guess, basically $1, and that bid, as we see, was not really ideal. Second, they had some other search campaigns running like this one right here, but the bid was insanely high, and that's because this is when they started optimizing for multiple conversion goals. So instead of just focusing on purchases, this was phone calls along with purchases, and everything else, they was just basically additions, like a last try to finally make things successful. They even tried a performance max campaign, but even then, they were not able to run it for too long because they had no clue what was going wrong. During this entire first half of the year, they were barely getting results. So that's what I kind of found out from the initial point of view, which was there was no real strategy in place. And you might be surprised to hear that so many e-commerce brands, even those that are getting some decent results, have no real strategy in place. What that means is the results they could actually be getting could be much more efficient, could be much more scalable than what they're actually getting right now because they have just launched a bunch of things and they're just hoping and praying something works. But along with that, when I took a little bit of a deeper look into the brand, what I started to realize is that there were a lot of feed related issues during that time. I mean, right now, if we see right here, there's only about 7 or so products which have some kind of issues associated with them. But during the time we started, about half of these products had issues. And that's because since shopping campaigns were not even working, nobody had bothered to go in and make these products that were running better, such as with the product feeds, such as with the product images. So as a result, there were a lot of policy violations. Google was thinking it was selling something completely different than what this brand was actually selling. So that was kind of the whole mess that we kind of came into. Now, as always, with any brand we work with, we like to start from the ground up, the foundation up. And this brand was no exception. Once we saw that there were a lot of kind of foundational issues that were going on with the brand, we decided to start work from the ground up. So instead of just coming in and directly launching a bunch of things like these campaigns right here. We actually started by shutting off majority of the campaigns and leaving only one major campaign during the start running, which was this Performance Max campaign. And besides that, what we did is we went into the product feed and we started from the ground up. Of course, after fixing the conversion tracking issues, we went into the back end, we fixed up all of these product titles and images with only one clear goal in mind. We wanted to be different from all of these competitors standing out. I mean, we did not want to be just another cold plunge store, and a lot of these cold plunge competitors that were ranking here, they were actually putting in decent amounts of effort to make their product feed high quality. So this was what we were dealing with. What we did is essentially we took all of their approaches and we kind of condensed it into our own approach. We understood what approach to take based on what kind of product images they had. Was it mostly lifestyle images, or was it mostly these fake background images? Or based on the product titles they had, was it very lengthy and a lot of information, or was it just simple and straightforward like this? And we kind of used a strategy which was right in the middle, because what we noticed is a lot of these competitors, they were going both ways, where they had some with lifestyle images, some with plain white background, and some where the titles were very big, whereas some where the titles were very small. So we kind of took the approach that was right smack in the middle, but that's after we did keyword research for this brand. We understood exactly what are the high buying intent keywords, and that's kind of what got the feed to the level it was at. I mean, the CTRs blew up to about 1% or above. This was a very big feed because just before, barely anybody was even interacting with the brand to begin with. But once we had the product feed in place, then it was time for a Google ad strategy. Now, without the right strategy, none of this would work. That's just the reality. So in order to incorporate a strategy, what we did is we used the previous data which this brand already had, which is something we do for a lot of the brands we handle under my Google Ads agency, Your Marketing, which, by the way, if you run a brand doing $1 million a year, you need extra help scaling to the very next level with Google Ads, go onto my website at yourmarketing.com and schedule a free call with me to see essentially how we can work together and make that happen. But from that data analysis, we found out a select few products which historically had been proven to sell. So what we did is, instead of wasting time trying to test a bunch of different things, we launched a Performance Max campaign going after the best sellers only. And the strategy here was we did not want to launch a bunch of different things with basically too many assets and whatnot. Initially, we launched these feed only asset groups. This is one of them and this is the other one, where the main thing that was different was the search themes, the signals in general. That's all we wanted to do because we wanted to go right after shopping. We did not want to waste time confusing the algorithm to try 10 different things at once. But once kind of things started to work there, that's when we personally incorporated these assets and images and logos, etc. within the asset group section. But until then, what we were doing is we were just trying to find which asset group is working the best. And as we saw here, the feed only was almost always getting the most amount of sales, which is exactly what we wanted to see. But that was the generic approach for the Performance Max and the shopping side of things. And these other campaigns, they came later on. In the start, all we had was a brand search campaign and a PMax. That was enough to get this initial momentum with these initial sales. Literally going from one sale every few weeks to maybe even every month or two, to literally getting a sale every other day. This was a big feat for this brand. We were extremely excited during this time. And once we got to this stage, that's when we started launching these other campaigns. Now this campaign, this is also a PMax, which we recently started. This is for all the other products which have never really proven themselves. That's why it spent about $700 with 0 sales. But at this point, that's fine. We can invest that because we already have something that's working really well. We already have a cool traffic campaign getting us results. And what we did is we kept the branded search campaign going. It's just running in the background, nothing too crazy, but we launched a retargeting standard shopping campaign because, again, without proper retargeting with the brand at this level of average order value, where every order is about $3,000 to $5,000, proper retargeting is needed because not everybody's going to purchase on the first go. But essentially, this 4 campaign setup is what we decided on and what we plan to keep because, first of all, it's working. It's getting us a little bit of consistency. And number 2, we don't have the kind of leeway to make the campaign strategy too advanced and too fancy here because it's a high ticket store. You want to keep in mind that anytime your brand is mid-ticket or high ticket, the price itself, it determines a lot of the success your brand ends up getting. If you have a high cost product and you try to diversify too much with too many different campaigns, what will happen is all of that data that's coming in within these select few campaigns, it will now start to get spread out amongst these other different campaigns. And that's going to make it extremely difficult for your brand to get consistency and for your brand to grow long term, which is exactly what you don't want with a brand like this. So what we're doing here to scale now is we're basically focusing more on vertical scaling. We're increasing the budgets here every 7 to 14 days as needed based on the overall profitability and the return on ad spend of this brand. And we're going to be continuing to diversify with search campaigns as well. That's the only diversification we're doing here. We don't want to overcomplicate the approach with too many standard shopping or performance max campaigns. But again, if you run a brand doing $1 million a year, you need extra help scaling your brand to the next level, go onto my website at yourmarketing.com and schedule a free call with me to see essentially how we can work together and make that happen. But check out this video right here on the Google Ads retargeting strategy we're using recently to explore brands like these to the next level.